All right, everyone, I think we can go ahead and begin the presentation. We really appreciate everyone signing up for and more importantly attending our webinar today. So thank you all for being here as we present our webinar, NetSuite Release 2021.1 Preview. My name once again is Seth. I'm the Marketing Manager with Keystone. Just a few reminders up front that all of our attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please feel free to type those into the question or chat panes. Again, you should see those towards the right-hand side of your screen. We are going to try to save some time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you all may have. So I'm counting on all of you to ask away if you do have any questions for us. Also, this session is being recorded and a copy will be emailed to everybody within a few days. And so with all that said, I think we can go ahead and officially get started. I'm going to click to the next slide, but we really appreciate all of you joining us here today. I'm really excited to have you all here with us for the next hour, and I'm also very excited to have a lot of my colleagues joining me on the call here today. So I'm really pleased to have Eric Joswiak, our president, with me here, one of our principal consultants, Sarah Appland, one of our senior ERP consultants, Kyle Glynn, is on the line, as well as Russell Fulling, our practice director, and our director of development, Todd Grimm, are all joining me as our featured panelists and presenters. And so let me go ahead to the next slide and share with you a look at the agenda today. There's a lot here. We're going to try to move quickly through some of this stuff. We're going to slow down and try to get into detail on a few things. But there's a lot we're going to try to cover in the presentation today. So here's the agenda. First, Eric is going to touch on some of the administrative updates and project-related enhancements. Then Sarah will tell you a little bit about account setup and maintenance updates, some accounting and banking enhancements, a little bit about vendors purchasing and receiving, some highlights there. Then Kyle will tell you about some of the inventory management manufacturing updates. Russell will share some of his thoughts on Suite Analytics. And then finally, Todd will bring us home with Suite Cloud and Suite Script enhancements. And then, of course, after that, we will try to save some time for Q&A, like I mentioned. So again, please feel free to ask questions as we move through the presentation. If I get a chance to throw out a question in the middle of the webinar, I will, but we'll also try to save that time at the end. And so with all that said, Eric, if you're ready, I can go ahead and hand it over to you.
Yep. All right. That sounds great. Thanks, Seth. Yeah, so the first slide I'm going to do is the administrative highlights. And there's really kind of two areas here. There's not a ton. But one is international enhancements, and the second is some SSO or single sign-on updates. Just to call out in the international enhancements, first, there's a lot of country-specific enhancements. NetSuite's been doing a lot of investment in the international editions. So just, for folks on the call, I know I'll call out Ireland, Germany, and the UK, but there's about a dozen or dozen and a half countries that have updates. Ireland and UK kind of Brexit-related activities, and Germany actually is a little broader. The other thing that NetSuite puts into, and they put it in the international, but it's really more intercompany, but in the release notes it's included with internationalization enhancements, are some automation to the whole cross-charge and the netting process. So there are cross charges and netting. There are tools that you can use to effectively net. If subsidiary A owes subsidiary B 100K and subsidiary B owes a subsidiary A 80K, there's a process where you can tell NetSuite to net those two, so you only end up with a net of 20K due from subsidiary A to subsidiary B, if I remember the order I spoke those correctly. So what's the change now is you can net by class. So now It used to be that there was just an overall netting process, but now there's netting by class. And then also you can have different exchange rate types, and you can specify a particular type to use in the netting process, different than what's used at, for other transactions. And then on SSO, all I'll say is just we did see a lot of increased interest in SSO. We had several more clients deploy single sign-on in 2020. A lot, some related to the pandemic and the shifts in business environments. So there were just a number of changes in here, including NetSuite providing a new NetSuite-based option, but they made modifications to several other of the SSO technologies, and some were deprecated. So if you're using SSO, which is still a minority of our clients, you might want to look at that section. And that's it for administrative highlights. The other thing I wanted to touch on briefly are highlights related to changes made to the projects module. So NetSuite is making a change to the interface in this release, and whenever there's a change to the interface, you'll get people using NetSuite who will ask, hey, why did something change? It looks different. What's happened? Why is it different? So it's typical to get questions from users whenever there's a UI change, and there is a UI change in this version in this release. And that said, the release notes actually don't say much about it, which is kind of if you read the release notes, there's very little about what's changing. But NetSuite is making a number of changes to the UI for the project, and basically it's changes to how you can customize the task list and the hierarchy that you see on the task list on the schedule tab. I've got a small screenshot, difficult to see, but that's what's on this page. There's some streamlines to the record editing and creating process, and according to NetSuite, improved record viewing. So I will say this, NetSuite, for the clients who were in the very first wave of the release, what we also learned is it makes it, the new UI makes changes to field level accessibility, and they immediately came out with a notice that, okay, this would not be required in 2021.1, and they provided the ability to go under Setup Company General Preferences and turn off the new user interface. So, we would still advise that you stay with it. Be advised that if you have screens on fields on project records that are hyperlinks, they may be disabled, so they won't work as a hyperlink. You might have to go reset them as not disabled fields. And you do have the ability to turn the whole thing off. We do think that come 2021.2, this will be the default, and you won't have the opportunity to turn it off anymore. So we would encourage you to take a look at it and understand it, and use it, go on a go-forward basis. And then the only other thing comment I'll make is we anticipate, safe harbor statement. We anticipate that NetSuite is going to be making a number of changes to the projects module, and this is probably the first of several. So we'll expect more in 2021.2 and through all of 2022. And we also know that they're working their way towards a major enhancement and a really brand new, really next version of RevRec for projects that I kind of anticipate in late 2022. So the first of many, so they're starting with the UI. So I just be aware that, for those of you, I know a lot of you use the projects module. You should, and if you're converting this week, please go into your preview and check and review, your project records, how they look under the new interface, and if all is good, I'd say feel free to keep using the new version. So that is it for me. I have a very short presentation this time, and I will hand it off to Sarah, I think, right? Sarah, thanks. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Eric. Yes, I'm going to start out with some account setup highlights. Nothing major on this release, but I did want to let you know, although this is starting out slow, this will be something that I think people will be happy about in the future. There's enhancements to the customer scheduled maintenance page. And if you didn't know there was one of those, it's at Setup Company Customer Scheduled Maintenance. There will only be, and right now it's only the Oracle database maintenance that's allowed to reschedule, which is why I didn't make it a huge deal. But going forward, they are going to add more and more of their maintenance releases that you can reschedule. And this is like if you were implementing some kind of outside software and you were doing it mid-month and they all of a sudden decide to do some kind of maintenance release and you don't want that to happen the same time you're doing that, you can request to reschedule and it'll talk you through it if you request it. It's all right on this page when you go to it. And again, it will only show the ones that you are allowed to reschedule, so some you can't still. Just an FYI on that. And with that, we also decided we wanted to mention we have a lot of people that everybody gets those the tons of emails saying, hey, this is coming up and this is going to change and this is going to change. And sometimes there's so many, it just becomes noise, like many emails. And also, when you sign in and you have to check that little box to verify that you've read that they're going to do something like a maintenance or something like that, all those have settings on who can get those, if you weren't aware of that. So if there's people that need to be getting these that aren't, you can go to Setup Company Administrative Notifications and any of these. So if it's billing and renewal notices, your warehouse manager probably doesn't need to get that. So you can go in here and hit edit, and then under recipients, anyone who has the company setup permission, you'll be able to select from and say, yes, they should get that. And you can have them send an email or whatever. But this is where you can modify who is and isn't getting those. And also, again, this is a screenshot that's probably not easily seen, but also on the second tab of this where it says confirmed, this is a list of all of those messages that you get when you have to check and say yes to go ahead and get into NetSuite. This is a list of all of them that they've sent out that people have checked on and who checked on them and agreed. So when people tell you, oh, I didn't know that was coming, you can say, well, you had a notice, you just breezed past it. So anyway, just wanted to make sure everyone knew that was there. All right, go on to some accounting highlights. Again, not a whole lot here. A couple things we're going to talk about. Just an enhancement to advanced revenue management. There probably won't be much of these in the next couple of releases as they are doing a major redo of this module in the upcoming year or so. Again, safe harbor statement. The unbilled receivable adjustment journal grouping. So the way that they grouped them, previously it just used the default deferred revenue account on the general advanced revenue setup. Now it will use the deferred revenue count on the corresponding revenue element that is getting reclassed to the unbilled receivable. So that is a positive change because people that use that had to then do reclasses on their own. And then one little thing that they're giving as an option here. Some people, it may be worth looking at if you don't have a high volume of these. I'd wait because right now it's only for AR, it's not for AP. But this is a Suite app that you can go to your Suite apps menu and find it under, again, not sure why, but it's under the warehouse where wholesale and distribution. But I just typed in chargeback on the search and was able to pull it up. But what it does is it offers some management for reviewing your invoices that have where people have maybe short paid you or there's some kind of issue or something and you want to show that old AR is being paid, you could do a deduction or a chargeback and it'll basically create a credit memo for you and create a separate invoice. Um, that part seemed like uh, a lot of management unless you have that happen a whole lot. It'd probably just be easier to do it manually. The part that I think some of our clients may have the need for is the small balance write-off, where you could just do it once a month, maybe at month end. You can set up rules for, a fixed dollar amount and a percent, and it looks at both of those, and if it meets both criteria, it'll just automatically create a credit memo, and you can set up, the accounts that gets written off to, and the dollar amounts and everything, and it would just run that process once, and then you could decide which ones you wanted to write off. It'll tell you which ones are eligible based on your criteria, and then you agree or disagree. And it also is smart enough to know that there are some customers that you just aren't going to do that to. So you can exclude customers completely from any of this on the customer record. So those are just a couple of little things. The bigger thing for most people is going to be under banking, and it is the deprecation of the reconcile bank statement and reconcile credit card statement pages. That does not mean that you can no longer reconcile in NetSuite. What it means is they're doing away with um, I guess the old standard ERP reconciliation where you're checking off, just kind of ticking and tying like you would manually. They're doing away with that screen. You still will have it up until the next release in the fall, but now it will say that it's being deprecated at the top. You'll have your little ribbon at the top that says that. And so I would recommend, taking one or two of your bank statements um, and starting to switch them over to the new, where you go through the whole match bank data. And there will be a couple of steps to this. You can still upload um, bank statements manually. It is a very touchy upload, and it has to be very exact. They do now have the Bank Feed Suite app, and that's another one that's under the Suite apps menu that you can install. And then there are literally thousands. I think we talked about this when they first came out with it a couple of releases ago. Thousands of banks that it supports, and credit card accounts as well. And you can set it up through that, and then it will automatically download into the imported bank data side, and your transactions that you have in NetSuite will be on this account transaction side on the right. And for a good percentage of them, it will often just automatically match them, and those go into the second tab that says review next to that blue to be matched. And you match them here, then you can review what got matched, and then you submit them for reconciliation, and then you can go to your reconciliation and do that. So you could match these on a daily, weekly basis or whatever as they come in, and do your bank reconciliations that way. They do have some workarounds that weren't available before, and it's one of the reasons some people didn't like this. Is sometimes there are adjustments or voids or something weird that need to clear, but there's never going to be anything come in from the bank, and they have added a new clear for that, where you can check this and mark it clear, and it's going to go into this review just like a regular matched one from the bank. So they have provided a workaround if you don't download. For those of you that do use or want to use the Bank Feed Suite app, some of the things that they've improved about it over the last 2 or 3 releases is they now have a partially completed import status. When you have multiple accounts, which most businesses do, before, if one of them processed and the other two of them processed and one of them didn't, it still just came up with one line that said failed and not a very good reason. So now if it fails, it comes up with that it's partially completed, and it'll give you the ones that did go through, and the one that didn't go through, it'll give you an actual error reason, which is point number 2 here. If they all failed, or if a single one failed, they do give you specific import errors now. And they say, the credentials didn't work, or this was the issue, or the connection timed out, or various things. So they've done better with that. It's not so vague in general anymore, like it was in the beginning. There's also new email notification for the complete fail or partially completed. You get an email with troubleshooting information. And I mentioned on the other slide, they are going to allow us to clear transactions that have been recorded in NetSuite but don't actually hit the bank. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, the people that use this version of it always had to go to the register and do that kind of manual clearing, or they would even turn it off on the account record, switch to the old reconcile method, do it there, and then come back into this and finish what they were doing. So this is a much easier workaround to have it right on the screen. They also have on the actual screen where you set this all up, it's gotten a lot better as far as, for having multiple accounts and then multiple accounts at multiple banks. You don't have to go clear out everything now. There's more pop-ups that allow you to, like maybe reconnect or change your credentials or things right there on the one screen without going through the whole process time and time again, which is the way it started out, which was, I can speak from experience, very frustrating to many of my customers. So that has definitely been, they've gotten better with that. And it seems like another issue that previously had happened was anytime they would do a maintenance on this, you'd have to reconnect, and it seems like they're starting to get past that as well. So I think they've worked with their partner that has the clearinghouse for all these, and I think they've gotten their system down a little better. So it's definitely, I think, worth hopping on the bandwagon for this one. All right, I have one more. Not much to these, but just worth noting, and we wanted to tell you about them. You can set a default vendor payment account at the company level, and this would be at that, I think it's accounting preferences, and then the second tab on accounting preferences where you can set all the default accounts. There's now one for default vendor payment account. So if you always want, you have a trade payables bank account that all of your accounts are paid through, a certain checking account, you can set the default there. Again, it's a default, doesn't mean it can't be changed. You can also do that at the subsidiary level or even down to the vendor level. But still, when you're just, the thing that people on the preview video of this were having trouble with was when you go to bulk processing of bill payments, you still have to set an account there and pick your bills. It doesn't, because it doesn't know which, they haven't gone that far to be able to say, okay, only pull in the bills that use this account. So it's really just for a default, and it's at the vendor level, it's really good if you just are doing a payment right from the vendor record for maybe like a prepayment, which it does apply to, vendor prepayment. So you can set it there for that. And then the last thing that I have is just that I think some of the newer instances of NetSuite that have come out in the past few months maybe already have this, but you can now create a bill from the item receipt. And the benefit of this is if you've ever created an invoice from an item fulfillment, instead of pulling in everything and then you have to remove lines if you don't want to show the 0 lines, the same thing happens here with the bill. Only the items that were received will pull into that bill, and it'll save you a little time that way. So that's all I have from the accounting side. I will pass it on to, I think, Kyle.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Glenn. I'm based in Minneapolis. I'm new to Keystone. I've been here about 2 months. Prior to that, I was with another NetSuite partner doing implementations for about 3 years, mostly in wholesale distribution and manufacturing type scenarios. So my focus here with the team is really around inventory management. And so today I'll be talking through some of the updates that they've made in this new release. And some of these updates are mostly continuing what they've committed to already with just a new thing here or there. So really the newest thing that came out in this release is in supply planning. And they've done a lot of work in beefing up the supply planning area. What they've done is they've included something called a sales channel. It's rather unique to NetSuite. The reason being is it's much like class as a segment. It's not a custom record. It's not a custom list. It's its own record. Like class that tracks the sales channel. The intent is on the sales transactions, whether they be opportunities or actual orders, that they're selected each time, so there's no defaulting it from the customer record. And it's really selecting where it's coming from, B2B orders, B2C, etc. A lot of times we have this discussion of whether we want to track class with product line or with sales channel, and now they're giving people the ability to do both. And the sales channel within supply planning is you can use each of those channels to look at past orders, to do a little bit of demand planning, and then project within each channel what you're expecting. The one caveat that's really difficult here with the sales channel is they treat it a lot like the class segment, but it does not report the same. It's not available in financial reports, so you are unable to use the sales channel segment if you're reporting on an income statement. And a lot of times people who are already on NetSuite have figured out a method to track their sales channel via many alternative custom routes. So this is really intended for new people coming in, a nice way to organize that going forward. There's some minimal warehouse management enhancements, just some things here or there. So, some of it around bin management. They used to not allow partial on a single lot number of a line item. They used to not allow a partial quantity, and now they do. So again, pretty minimal there. Something that they are doing is committing to we'll talk about on the manufacturing side what they're doing, but they have a PackStation mobile app that's intended to really work like a kiosk. So if you're familiar with the pick, pack, and ship process, usually at that pick step, there's a packing station. This would be kind of like a tablet somebody could fill out, make it easier for them instead of lugging a cart around with a laptop on it if you've not invested in a shipping integrator, which does have a cost with it. So this is an area that they've been working on. Some people have looked at this as a go-between if they're kind of on the edge about going and committing with a shipping integrator, but I've heard solid feedback, so if you're interested, it's definitely worth checking out. On the next slide, please, Seth. I want to mention the supply chain control tower. Now, they've made a few updates to this. And this slide I grabbed from the presentation because they made this a point, and you can see it on the slide, how many releases and things they've updated within this module. And they've continued to do that. This time around, they're incorporating blanket purchase orders and inbound shipments, so better tracking on the procure to pay process. They've also allowed displaying of allocations and doing auto numbering within the simulations, along with some predicted risk. So those things may not be catching, but really what I think to take away from this is this supply chain control tower is really going nowhere. And I know that there's not a lot of people using it, but NetSuite is and always will be really a financially driven tool. And for the inventory managers to get their insight, they're going to need some sort of dashboard. And this is really going to be the home for that. That supply chain managers can do different simulations and projections and really practice things before making it live in the system. So I think there's a lot of introduction, and as the control tower gets more improved, I could see this really being a core function going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, the last one is on the manufacturing side. So they've updated the way in the past, if you ever looked at work order lead time, the value you would put in is the number of days it takes to make a single unit, which is kind of different and funky compared to the way that they do the purchase side. So now they've cleaned that up and they allow you to do an auto calculation. So NetSuite will, based on data that it has, make a prediction of what a lead time is for a work order. And then obviously you can overwrite that if you need to. The second area that they are building on is the manufacturing mobile app. And it's really built for tablets and just being able to manage work orders. It's free. You can use it whether you're using WIP or just light manufacturing. At the current moment, it does not handle serialized items, but they have made a commitment to add that for future releases. So you get free stuff, right? So they're developing this, and really, again, another takeaway here is RF Smart, I don't think is going to be the only player on the WMS side, and NetSuite's committing to in areas that they can really gain some business, and there's some that are kind of looking for that in between, and that's really where they're putting their attention with some of this mobile stuff as I go between. So that's it for my presentation on the inventory side. I will pass it over to Russell, I believe, talk about Suite Analytics.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'll give you a quick overview of Suite Analytics before we get into some of the changes. NetSuite's made a commitment to these Suite Analytics workbooks now, and they've actually put some templates out there. So the way this works is you create a data set, which is very similar to a saved search. And then that data set can be converted into what NetSuite calls a workbook. And that workbook can take the form of a pivot table or a chart. And the investment that NetSuite has made in this is kind of to get people to do some of the work that gets done offline in Excel by exporting saved searches to do inside of NetSuite with this Suite Analytics workbook. So you create your result set, then you build your pivot table or workbook inside of NetSuite, and you can analyze the data there without having to use Excel. That's the goal of this, and it keeps getting a little bit better each release. The last release, they introduced the templates that are out there. If you look in your Suite Analytics tab, you'll see some templates for sales orders, purchase order workbook, sales orders, invoice, things like that. There are a couple manufacturing workbooks to get an insight into what's going on in the warehouse. So for this change this year, they've actually put a very useful one in. This one is that you can do calculations now on the results that are in the workbook. So you'd always be able to do that on similar to a saved search or in the production of the result set. But now you can actually build formulas inside of the workbooks, the pivot tables that can do transaction, that can sum up or do mathematical computations on these results that's in that workbook. It's a better capability for this workbook, and they're also giving you the ability to highlight these rows based on results. So go to the next slide, Seth. That's the conditional formatting that I was talking about, much like a saved search, that you can put your results inside of this workbook to highlight any areas that you want to bring attention to, such as negative numbers, positive numbers, numbers over a certain amount, things like that. And the last thing that's new this year in the analytics workbook is this My Transactions. It's another template that I spoke of a second ago that lets a user look at all the transactions that he or she has completed in the past 12 months. So anytime you create a transaction that's logged into this data set, And then you can go in and look at everything that you've done by transaction for 12 months. And you can sort that by accounting period. You can sort it by transaction type. You can support it by individual dates if you like. So those are the things, those are kind of the new things overall that's going on in Suite Analytics. I don't know if it's getting a lot of use, but it's getting better and better. And we're actually using it a little bit internally for some reporting. There's a few changes to the joins and some of the table structures that they put in there, but I think that it just continues to get better and better each release. Those are the highlights of this release. So that's it for me, and I'll give it over to Todd, who has some insight into the Suite Talk improvements.
Thank you, Russell. So first off, the REST record service. Some new record types have been added to the list of fully supported record types. There's quite a few. A lot of them are kind of obscure. Most of the standard record types that we care about have been there for a while. So you can see the release notes to see the full list. Another new thing is you can now select one or more body field objects on from a record using a new get method. It should be noted though that this does not apply to sublist fields or subrecord fields yet. So yeah, it's new functionality, allows you to grab the field object as opposed to the field value. So there's also been some changes in the return format of enumerator fields. Those are the select list fields. Previously, those would always return internal IDs, but now they're going to actually return a reference with both the reference name or the UI name field label, as well as the internal ID itself. So it's kind of acts a lot like the lookup fields from the search module. On the REST Web Services, the asynchronous request execution, REST Web Services is a new beta feature. You do have to complete the Oracle NetSuite Umbrella Beta Program recruitment form in order to access the beta feature. And basically, it just allows you to asynchronously request stack REST requests on top of each other, and they go into a queue. And so instead of receiving a direct response as to whether your call was successful or not, you get a response with a job ID, and then you would ping another REST service with that job ID to check the status of that asynchronous request. There's going to be a new option in the integration record to support the OAuth 2 authorization flow for REST Web Services. You know, OAuth 2 has been a bit of a frustrating point for us, having a hard time getting it to work. So we'll see if this update has made any improvements for that for us. Next slide, please, Seth. Thank you. SOAP Web Services. There's a new default value for the available without login field for file cabinet uploads, and this is going to apply to image type fields and web hosting fields that were added to the file cabinet prior to the 2021.1, or I'm sorry, it's only applying to those files added to the file cabinet after the 2021.1 release. Prior to that, the default value will remain true. So available without login is going to be false by default moving forward. Previously, it was always true. And then, you know, the new SOAP version 2021.1 and the SOAP schema browser, those will be out soon. I believe they are still currently shown as not available. So we'll see when that changes. New updates for the Suite Cloud SDK development program. The Suite Cloud CLI for Node.js and Java are both available, and the IDE plugin for WebStorm and Clips are also now available. Some additional changes to the Suite Cloud development framework. There's a new installation preference configuration for script deployments in Suite App projects. So that means you can configure the behavior of custom fields that are added to script deployments themselves. And then there are some minor updates to custom objects in the project. Many of the object fields are now considered translatable fields. You can just see the release notes for the full list of custom objects that changed. So SuiteScript 2.1 client scripts can now be uploaded to the file cabinet. And this will allow you to utilize ES6 or ECMAScript 6 plus new syntax for client scripts. You should note, though, that these client scripts 2.1 client scripts will not work on the scriptable cart. So if you have SuiteCommerce Advanced with scriptable cart, those client scripts are not going to apply, or you cannot use 2.1 client scripts on those just yet. There's a new secrets management feature. This will allow you to store certain credential-related secrets, passwords, keys, things like that, that are usually used for digital authentication between systems. You can now store these in a new area in NetSuite and access them, but you do have to have the permissions enabled to access those new secrets. They can be found under Setup Company Preferences API Secrets. Along with the SuiteScript 2.1 client scripts being available, you can also now utilize SuiteScript 2.1 in the debugger as well. There's been a change to how the current record.get subrecord method works. Previously, if you would call that get subrecord method on a record that didn't exist, then it would return null, and that would be one way of checking as to whether or not there was a subrecord on that line. What's changing is now if you call that method on a line that doesn't have a subrecord, it will now create a new subrecord and return that instead. So if you have any code out there and you were utilizing kind of the backdoor way of checking as to whether or not a subrecord existed, you'll have to actually now use the specific has subrecord method instead. So there's a new Suite App Info module added to SuiteScript 2. It contains methods that allow you to retrieve information about different installed bundles that you have in the account. And it might seem like overkill, but believe me, there are many accounts that actually have a mind-numbing number of different Suite apps and things that have been installed because they've been around for so long. So this could be very useful to iterate through that information programmatically to speed that up. There's a new email send security update. There's a new permission that is going to allow roles or users to send an email on behalf of another user. This is good because it adds new functionality in the UI for users. The downside or the drawback of this is that previously, via code, we could do this without any permissions necessary. And I believe moving forward now, if you have any code that was kind of sending an email from a default email address, and it happens to now be a user that is triggering that code to run, I believe that user will now have to have this permission on their role in order for that to actually work. And next slide there, please, Seth. There's new support, new methods added to the file module. You can now copy files that are in the file cabinet. I'm actually not sure why that wasn't already available. It seems pretty logical, but new functionality added, so that's good. There are new built-in functions for SuiteQL. So this is for using the query module. There are just some new built-in functions that can be utilized there. This is pretty important here. The deprecation of RESTless authentication through user credentials. The excuse me, sorry, I'm trying to dock this thing, get out of my way so I can read. Here we go. Sorry. So any RESTless that are going to be created, that were created after January 1st, not necessarily the 2021.1 release. This is anything after January 1st with user credentials. They will stop working as of the 2021.1 release. So any RESTless that were created before that are okay, but anything after that point and moving forward, you will not be able to use user credential or what's known as basic authentication for RESTlets. So 2021.1 SuiteScript record exposures. There's new record types exposed to SuiteScript. Again, these are kind of obscure new record types. See the full list. See this release notes for the full list. And funny enough, the 21.1 records browser is not yet available. So even if you wanted to see the details of those new records, you really can't. You can just see what they're called. All right, next slide.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's
All right,
it.
that was it.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Appreciate that. And of course, thank you to Eric and Sarah, Kyle, and Russell for sharing all that with us. So I think we've come kind of pretty much to the conclusion of the webinar here. Just a reminder to test your processes in your preview account. You know, I think we've got a lot of our clients who are the phase 2 upgrade, which is later this week. So we wanted to make sure we could share as much insight with you all as possible prior to your upgrade dates, and just make you aware of some of these, you know, bigger features, but then also smaller ones that, you know, you might want to be, you know, interested in or might have an impact on your instance. And so with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up a little bit early. You know, we really appreciate everybody taking time to join us today. Please do keep a lookout for a follow-up email in the next couple of days. I'll have a copy of the recording. Feel free to share that with your colleagues if you'd like, if you think some of these tips or new features might catch their interest. So, and just one other social plug I always like to do, if you're not always, you know, following us on social media, please give us a like and a follow. We're always promoting webinars like this, as well as our latest blogs and announcements, and much more. But we really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us and be here with us today. And we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending. We appreciate it.